Focusing maybe more on your undergraduate part of your education. So what are the things that prepared you well for what you've actually ended up doing?
Generally speaking, right, having a mathematics degree, they just help me with problem solving so that when I see data, I'm comfortable saying, oh, I can dig into this.
Greetings. Welcome to Eric's Angle, the podcast for Iowa State mathematics students. I am your host, Eric Weber, chair of the mathematics department. Today's guest is a 2000 graduate of Iowa State, double majoring in mathematics and economics. His name is Ben Malin, and he is the vice president for research at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. As a student, Ben served on the VISA planning committee back when Iowa State had VISA. Please welcome Ben Malin. Hi, Ben. Welcome to Eric's Angle.
Thanks for having me. It's good to join you today.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your story?
Well, I grew up in Iowa, lived in the southwest part of the state from the time I was in kindergarten through my junior year. Went to Nebraska, a hiatus for a couple of years, and then came back to Iowa State for my undergraduate degree. But started out as a math major and finished as a math major. But along the way, took some other courses that were related to math, computer science, and economics, and at the encouragement of a professor in economics, picked up a double major in economics. So very fond of Iowa State, had great experience there. I have three siblings who also all attended Iowa State. My parents now live in Ames, and so get the opportunity to come back to Iowa State, be on campus, was there earlier this summer and walked around Carver Hall and to see the different places. But after being in Iowa State, I continued to pursue economics, and when I got my PhD at Stanford in 2006, finished my work there. And since then, I've been working for the Federal Reserve System. So first at the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., and then for the last 12 years here in Minneapolis, where I'm now a senior research economist, vice president of the research department.
So first off, sounds like you're definitely a cyclone family.
We are, if you ask, my boys will be asked sometimes, well, what football team do you like, or something like that, and people expect them to say the Vikings or the Packers, and they say Iowa State, and that's all. Really, you like Iowa State football? Anyway, which is much better now than when I was in school, but we are definitely, very. My wife was also an Iowa State alumnus in chemical engineering, so very much are proud of our connections there.
Nice. So when you so you said you went to Nebraska first, and we won't hold that against you. When you went
I should have said I went to Nebraska. So sorry, my family moved to Nebraska when I was a junior in high school.
Okay.
So I wrapped up. I finished my high school years in Nebraska. But when it came time to choose a college, it was there was no competition.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Can I put the Cornhuskers down? Maybe I shouldn't. I think I'm probably in safe company to do that.
Yeah. So when you went to Iowa State, did you start as a math major? Like, did you enter college thinking you would study math? And if you did, why? Why did you pick math?
So, when I went to Iowa State, I started out as a math major. Why? Because I really didn't know what I wanted to do for a career. But what I had in my mind was the possibility of maybe being like you, Eric, a college professor. And in mathematics, I thought maybe just because I was good at math. I loved growing up. I was competed in various mathematics competitions, whether that be math counts in middle school or other things. I'd taken advanced math in high school. And I'd like to teach. I think that's kind of a gifting of mine to communicate, more complex ideas clearly to people, and I kind of had a passion for that. And so I thought, well, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but declaring as a math major and continuing my classes, I know I'll enjoy those classes, and then we'll see what that looks like. And I love my math classes that I took at Iowa State. My first year, theory of linear algebra, and then applications of linear algebra, and kind of seeing some ways that work. I think as I got into some of my upper level classes, though, although my professors were very good at sharing how they took the abstract ideas maybe that they would teach us and saying, oh, well, here's how it could be applied in different ways. Here's the connection to the real world. I had a difficult time myself making sometimes those connections. But where I saw a connection that to the real world was in economics. So in economics, economics is not mathematics, it's social science, but we use a lot of math, especially in cutting edge research. I mean, mathematics is the language that economists speak. It's for our theoretical models, or now even the area I work, quantitative theoretical models, a lot of computer programming and solving mathematical models. That then, though, let me use the quantitative skills that I had, that I learned in mathematics, but then apply it to some questions I was interested in when it came to public policy, when it came to understanding how the world worked in terms of, business and finance and things like that. So, but yeah, I definitely so started as a math major, and then along the way, I think it was my junior year, I picked up the economics double major, and so I had a lot of coursework in economics my spring semester, my junior year, and my senior year. And I also had a statistics minor as well along the way that I was able to add in there.
So you said that you had thought possibly of becoming like a math professor. So I guess you had grad school as a possible outcome, even entering college. So that's interesting to me, just because I think a lot of students don't really think about grad school when they're just starting college.
Yeah, well, I think I didn't really understand what it would look like. I mean, I was thinking, like, again, my interest in math, my love for teaching, and probably wanted to do the teaching at what I would consider a higher level. I didn't know, at an institution where people were like really devoted to learning. Not necessarily for me. I wasn't so sure I want to do that like at high school, or that didn't seem to be my calling. I think as I then, but I didn't know. I mean, I have a grandpa who's a medical doctor, but no one else in my family had gone to graduate school, so I didn't really know what the whole process for graduate school, what that would look like, how to prepare myself for it, and so on. So I feel like I was on a kind of a learning path even there, with professors at Iowa State telling me, as I got into my sophomore and my junior year, saying, you're doing well in classes, you're showing aptitude. Would you ever, and then when I said, oh, I think I might want to be a professor someday, encouraging me in that, helped me understand what graduate school would look like. Helped me understand that there were actually fellowships that one could get to study, because that was a big thing for me. Like, really, people after 4 years of undergrad, they go and they have more school. How do they pay for that, right? Versus going out right away and finding a job. So I think it was really through the encouragement of professors, again, my junior year probably, that I actually started to pursue graduate school even more intentionally, than rather than just being an idea that that's something I could do. The other thing I that I did my junior year, at the same time I picked up a double major in economics, I studied for the actuarial exams. I actually passed my first two actuarial exams. I did a summer internship after my junior year at Principal Financial Group, which was a great opportunity, in Des Moines, and had a job offer there. But I think through that experience, I realized, you know what, I wasn't ready to go out and work and take that route for the rest of my life. I thought, actually, going on to graduate school, going deeper into economics, became more attractive to me at that point.
So when you entered grad school, were you thinking college professor still?
Yeah, I was, and that's basically because that's all I had ever known, right? I had, straight from high school, undergraduate, and then I went straight to graduate school after graduating from Iowa State. In my cohort at Stanford, probably it was half and half. Half the students had done some other sort of pre-doctoral work, maybe a research assistant position someplace, and had built up some real world experience. I hadn't. So, all the economists I knew were economists at the university. And so that really was, for me, what I thought, well, that's what I'm working towards. I don't know how the hiring process in mathematics works, but in the economics world, when you get to the end of your PhD program, in the year that you're about to graduate, there's actually the American Economics Association has its annual meeting every year in the first week of January. And so all PhD students around the country, say 1,000 of us, would descend on one. And the year in 2006, it was in Boston. We went to Boston for a 4-day weekend. You send out applications. I think I sent out 80 or 100 applications. This was back in the day before electronic applications, so I had to put together all my papers into a packet and mail them out to places across the country. But apply 80 to 100 places. I think I had 25 interviews at institutions over the course of 4 days. So these would be 30, 45-minute interviews at hotels around Boston. And I interviewed with, so my area of focus was in macroeconomics, but also public policy, public finance. And so I interviewed with a lot of, academic research departments, also business school departments, liberal arts schools, probably, so I don't know, probably 2/3 of the places I interviewed with were academic institutions. And then the others were, the Federal Reserve System, our nation's central bank, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Congressional Budget Office, so other government organizations that hire macroeconomists, some think tanks, and some economic consulting firms. So there was an array of places. And then, you just go through the process. I had a handful of follow-up interviews, fly-out visits, and then I had 3 job offers at the end, and had to choose. One was from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors in DC, and then I had a couple of academic offers. And it was hard because I'd always viewed myself as a teacher, as staying as a professor. But in talking with my advisors and getting to know what the Federal Reserve System is like, the Federal Reserve System actually for hiring economists the job is very much like an academic job in the following sense. So it's not completely, but there's a portion of my time, even now, that's dedicated to independent research or work that I would do that's not directed from anyone else, but directed by myself and any co-authors I have, and we're trying to publish at the end of the day, work into academic journals. So it'd be very much, I think, what faculty members at Iowa State would do. Rather than having a teaching responsibility as well, my kind of teaching responsibility is provide monetary policy advice to policymakers here within the Federal Reserve System, or doing, when I was younger in my career, it was providing, an analysis of data, helping our policymakers understand what was happening in the economy in the real time. So there was that. There was also, there were opportunities to, a number of economists at the Federal Reserve System are adjunct professors at local universities, or teach from time to time. So I knew that was a possibility. So for me, it came down to kind of where did I think I could most successfully move my career forward, and I chose the Federal Reserve over some. It was my offers were from some smaller liberal arts schools, and it kind of just came down to, for me, the benefits of having a larger set of colleagues, of having access to computing power and data. I thought there were some better opportunities for things I needed to do. And then the closeness, I mentioned before, for me, trying to make that connection from my academic work to real world practical application, how closely that happens at the Federal Reserve System was a benefit for me. Now I have colleagues, right, who are at universities across the nation, who don't need that closeness and do research that's very applicable to the real world, who probably know more about monetary policy maybe than I do, even though I'm within the machine at the Federal Reserve. So I think it's just there are different people you kind of get to know personally what works for you, and that's what drew me to the Federal Reserve System. So especially, and then I would say in my 18 years now in the Federal Reserve System, really the first 5 to 10, I had a lot of time for research as I've kind of my career trajectory has gone on, and I've built up somewhat, I would say, internal capital. So knowledge of how the Federal Reserve System works, connections with people. I've taken on some more leadership and management responsibilities over the last few years. So I've moved away a little bit from that, kind of frontline of research. But I still like having time when I can carve out for that and to pursue those questions. And also just to be in an environment where I'm seeing cutting edge research still being done. I feel like I'm kind of at a university, even if there's not, right? It's not quite the same.
Right. So, focusing maybe more on your undergraduate part of your education, both the math and the economics. So what are the things that you had as far as learning and training goes prepared you well for what you've actually ended up doing? And maybe on the flip side of that, what are things that maybe weren't so well prepared that you've had to learn along the way that we might think about as a institution or even as a department?
Yeah. I think generally speaking, right, having a mathematics degree, it just helped me with problem solving, identifying clearly what the problem is, going through the stage of thinking of what are potential approaches, sometimes being able to realize that what might seem as the most clear route, understanding why that might not work, and thinking creatively of like what other things would help get around that, or is there a different angle? I think Eric's angle, different angle to take on how we might solve that. So I think mathematics very much prepared me for that. Gave me quantitative, built up rigorous quantitative, skills, so that when I see data, when I read computer code, like I'm comfortable saying, oh, I can dig into this and figure out how this works. Because I have a foundation for understanding that. So I think those technical skills oftentimes, they demystify the black box of what's actually going on with this complicated sounding term, of, I don't know what, I think a lot of times sorry, this is an aside, but in statistics and stuff, you hear all these various terms of heteroscedasticity and did you correct for such and such, and boy, you hear them and you think, boy, that sounds like a really complicated thing. And then when you start thinking about it, you're like, well, what would be the first thing that might mean that my standard assumptions are incorrect? Oh, it'd be this. Oh, well, that complicated term just means like how you correct for that, right? So having that exposure in my math classes and my statistics classes to some of those things then helped me like understand the processes that when I read a piece of economics analysis, trying to big picture, what's the author of this, what are they trying to do, and what are some of the challenges they have to correct for, and so on. So it gives me those things. I think so in many ways when I went to graduate school in economics, right, like I said, in economics, mathematics is the language we use to speak to one another. And so my first year of the graduate school course in economics, some people would say it's meant to weed people out. I don't think so, but it's meant to get people to a really strong foundation. And having already a strong mathematics background helped me to be able to get through that first year with keeping my eye on the economics concepts and not being just overwhelmed with what's the language we use to talk about those economic concepts. So I felt very, very prepared for that. Where I would say I struggled when I was in graduate school is going from the first couple years of graduate school, which is again coursework, it's getting the master's, to then my upper years producing research, not just being able to regurgitate, understand what other people learned, but it's like where are the holes, how are we creative in looking at things in a different way. And maybe this is so. Maybe I'm speaking to some of your students or others who would be considering going to graduate school, and maybe are on the fence of should they go straight from undergraduate to graduate school, or would a little bit of experience be helpful? There's a trade-off. I think going straight, I was ready for classes. I hadn't gone out. I was still ready to work many hours on that. What was difficult is after when I started working on my research, like again, for me, seeing the real world, like what are the big questions that people are asking? I see what we're asking academically, but what's the application and so on. And I thought some of my colleagues, maybe who had a couple years of experience and were thinking about those things, had better context for then starting to ask really interesting research questions. While I felt like in my third year in graduate school, I spun my wheels a little bit in that. So now you ask, how could the mathematics department, what do you do to provide, opportunities for that? I mean, I don't know, but I say this now. So at the Minneapolis Fed, I have research assistants who work with me. Some are PhD students at the University of Minnesota who are working on their economics PhD, but then they work part-time at the Federal Reserve of Minneapolis as my research assistant. We also have a handful of recent graduates with their bachelor's degrees who are considering going to graduate school, but first want to get their feet wet with research and see what it's really like. So to the extent, so what I'm always telling them, or when I'm telling college students who interview or high school students who are considering going to economics is, even as an undergraduate, can you get your feet wet with research? Can you get opportunities to work with faculty members? Are there ways that you are partnering with, the private sector, and you're doing consulting work for them that you can draw your undergraduates into and seeing how mathematics is actually used in some of those areas? I think some of that real world context, helping students understand, not the answer to everything isn't usually oftentimes not a textbook answer. Things get messy. You have to make approximations and assumptions, and so because of that, your answers aren't always, I guess I had the impression oftentimes that, well, people just know certain things and everyone knows it and that's it. Well, in different contexts, right? You've made approximations or whatever, and so now there's always kind of open questions. The world's more complicated than it can be in our textbook. So helping students see that, understand the richness, the complexity of the world, understanding where math can help them answer some of those questions, but where there's still a lot of open things that even tenured professors at Iowa State who have great knowledge, they don't know the answer, and so then that I think give students hey, there's more things for us to learn. And if they have that desire to be creative, to engage and to learn those things, hopefully that's motivating for them.
Wow, there's a lot to chew on there.
Sorry,
I appreciate.
I'm kind of rambling into.
No, it's all good. But maybe to finish up here, now with some hindsight, what types of things might you say to our students, our math majors, as far as possibilities for careers, not even specifically at the Fed or in a financial context? I mean, you yourself were planning on teaching. You knew you didn't necessarily want to teach at the high school level, but you were thinking about teaching. And then I think for a lot of math majors, you've got actuarial science, you've got teaching, and then the list drops off really fast. What are the options from there? And so I wonder if you have, based on your experience and what you've seen, if you have suggestions for things to think about.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think what's clear from my story is, if you would have asked me, if you'd asked me a time, what will you be doing in 5 years? My answer probably has, when I was in high school, when I was in college, when I was 10 years out of college, I would have been completely wrong. My forecast would not have been correct of what I actually ended up doing. And so I think keeping an open mind to what opportunities are out there, trying new things as opportunities arise, and seeing what I would tell students, see what interests you, whether that is a specific math class or whether it's a related discipline that has interesting content where you can maybe see taking some of the skills you developed in math and applying them there. I think that's that's useful to do. I think I would also, tell students if I would tell myself, so this really isn't around career trajectory, but this is maybe a bit of advice, unsolicited advice on what would I have done differently as an undergrad. I think as an undergrad, oftentimes I took the classes and I worked towards getting the grade at the end of the class, rather than saying, I really want to master this material, not just for the grade, but so that I know it. So then, right, I'll be able to apply it in whatever comes next, sometimes not knowing what would come next. So I would say just encouraging them to working hard, challenging themselves, um, trying new things in the classes. Look for, additional enrichment activities, either, research on the side with professors or opportunities to maybe explore some of the concepts they're learning at a deeper level. Because I think it's that, that's what we want to be doing in college, is like this, or I mean, maybe I didn't want to be doing in college. I was just trying to get through each class. But, in hindsight, like, boy, did I squander some of my opportunities to really learn things at a deep level. And who knows how, that that would have been used later on. I think when I was in graduate school, I came to love that learning process even more so than right as an undergraduate. So I guess I'm speaking a little bit from maybe that experience. And sometimes I was kicking myself in graduate school, like, oh, I know I had some of this material before. Why didn't I really grasp it at a deeper level than I did?
Well, Ben, this has been great. I appreciate you being here, and thanks for appearing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, thank you so much for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to join you. It's been fun.